We are now live. Thank you all for joining me on another edition of the Red Pill Diaries. I'm your host, your brother, and your friend Rashid, and I'd like to thank each and every one of you for spending the time with me today, for choosing this platform as we wait for our guest to arrive out of Malta. I believe it's out of Malta, and so and so there's a huge time difference. All right, so we'll wait for them and to arrive. But until they arrive, we got to talk about a few things. Okay. Um, I was reading a news clip uh, yesterday, and I sent it to my co-host, who is actually almost back in good health. Rashid, I'm Rashid, and that's Rashid. And he and I were talking. We're very good friends, and I sent him a message of a clip, a news clip from, I think it was from Reuters, if I'm not mistaken, where one of the nations, I believe it was Qatar. Matter of fact, I could bring it up for you real quick. Let's see, Rashid. Mm. It's a clip, very important clip. Um, Bahrain. I think it was Bahrain, and they were talking about UN. They would be behind a UN mandate or authorization for the use of force against Iran to reopen up the Strait of Hormuz. And in bizarro world, you would say, there's some legitimacy to that. But in the real world, where common sense should reign supreme and where rational thinking should be the predominant way of analyzing stuff, you would say, why would you authorize, or why would you be ready to help authorize, or table an authorization for force against Iran for using its UN mandated and UN given right of self defense against nations that were in negotiation with Iran and then initiated an unprovoked attack as the so-called negotiation had reached agreements. This lets you know that Bahrain, Qatar, and all of the rest of them are nothing but U.S. outposts in West Asia. Hopefully, hold on one second. Let's see. Uh, Evarist Bartolo. Hold on one second. I just got it. Just got a message. Hold on one second. Hold on one second. What's good, them Sparks? Trying to see which one. Hold on one second, everybody. I just got a message. I'm trying to make sure it's not him. This happens live on there. And remember, there's a big time difference. So what's good? But think about, as I'm looking at this, I just want you to think about the madness, the sheer audacity, and the lunacy of this stuff. This is why I continue to tell you that we're in the change of worlds. Because this irrational, unsound thought is not just isolated to Donald Trump. It's not just isolated to the Trump regime or to the Starmer regime. It has percolated and permeated, and now it has spread across the entire world, and there's hardly any place that's not affected or inculcated with the lunacy of these berserkers out of the Western world. It's crazy. It's absolutely insane that you would, first of all, let me tell you something. To table that against a Muslim nation is absolutely outrageous if you are. And I'm gonna tell you why. Not because if there was another nation that needed tabled, another Muslim nation, and they were out of pocket, then yes. But you help plan, you help finance, you are also enabling the aggression against Iran with your land, your water, your airspace, your intelligence services. And yet, when Iran hits back where it hurts in the pocketbooks, you now are crying uncle. And you're saying, hey, hold on. I didn't know it was going to hurt me that bad. Well, you should have thought of that before you went up to the guy's face and socked him in the face. Now you want a break. Now you want a relief, as he has you in the rear naked choke. Now you want a little relief. But it was you that socked him. You understand? The insanity, and I can't say this enough, the insanity of these people is unreal. Let me hit him up one more time. I hate with these different time zone things because it messes up sometimes. Hold on one second. Matthew, Salim. Oh, Salim, I got to hit you back too. Let me let him know we are live now. We are live, waiting for you to join us. Okay. Yeah, message. I'm sorry. Anyway, so I just want you to think about that. I had to share that with you because the lunacy was so crazy that I could not believe that nobody else saw that. Okay. As a matter of fact, let me see if I can put it up. I believe it might be under a paywall now, and I don't think this is where I have the paywall exclusion on my phone. I think it's on my computer. I sent it to Rashid, and we just it was under, yeah. It says Bahrain. Let me. Yes, under a paywall on this one. Bahrain. Oh man, it's pushes UN back action against Iran. Isn't that absolutely sad? You are Iran's neighbor. You are a fellow Muslim nation, and Israel is trying to expand, and you will eventually be ground up in the machine. And yet, you don't have the common sense to see that everybody in every nation associated with the Western Empire eventually become food for the machine. You think that you're still in the good graces of the empire, but the empire is using you until all of your usefulness is used up. And guess what happens? You go to the meat grinder. You go absolutely to the meat grinder. And you're so ignorant, so arrogant, so boastful, and so inebriated and so animated over the acquisition of wealth that you don't understand that the wealth that you are acquiring in dollars can and will be eliminated soon. The whole world is moving away from the petrodollar system. This is what's driving the empire insane because their plans are now falling apart. Look at the price that their allies are paying. Forget about Iran for a minute. Let's look at Bahrain for a minute. Bahrain wants to be so much a part of the West that it is forgetting the life's lessons that are learned on a daily basis. Germany, the economic and industrial and technological power of Europe, and was the second most powerful economic engine of Western civilization, has fallen deep into recession. We see industry being gutted and the deindustrialization of the second most powerful economic engine of the West, all due to its cooperation with the American empire. So if that is not a lesson for you, and you are much less to them than Germany is to the American empire, look at what is happening to the whole of Europe as America talked Europe into sanctioning Russia and openly saying that we want to put a strategic defeat on Russia. We will not accept Russian oil and gas. And now look what happens. The empire says, okay, if you do this, then I'll sell you cheap liquefied gas. And as soon as Europe shot itself in both feet, both arms, and in the back, America said, hey, we're going to have to charge you triple the price. That's mafia style. That is mafioso style. And then now you're caught between a rock and a hard place. Either you go on being extorted by your so-called ally, or you capitulate to the person or the people whom you tried to destroy. And what's making matters worse is then they destabilize North Africa, where you get a large portion of your gas and oil from too. The United States destabilizes it. And then it goes in and destabilizes West Asia or the Middle East, where you've got a lot some of your stuff too. And now your economies, because remember, Europe is resource poor. So now your economies are sputtering, and you are living in a debt cycle that is affecting the masses of, I believe, what, 700 million people in Europe, or 600 and some, or 700 and some million people across Europe. And yet Bahrain, which does not share a culture, a religion, or even a friendship, a true friendship with them, is turning on a person that's your neighbor. Listen, you can change friends, you can change your mind, you can change your underwear, you can change your clothes, but you just cannot change your geography. It is absolutely insane, right, to think that you can. Hold on, I just got a ping. Hold on one second. Hold up. Ooh. Oh, yeah. Oh, that's Steve Jeremy. Okay. Anyway, so as we wait, hopefully he'll be, because he's in Malta, I believe. And he and I talked yesterday. So we are supposed to be, we communicated yesterday for the show. Okay, again. And so I'm not clickbait. If he does not show, I will take his name off the title. Okay, and then we'll reschedule it. I did not do that, but we still got a triple header today. At 2, we got Larry Johnson, CIA analyst, and then at 7, if I'm not mistaken, or 7:30, we got Canadian Professor Salim Mansour on the platform. So it's a triple header. We're giving you some today anyhow. All right. So, but think about that. You can change your clothes, you can change your underwear, but you cannot change your geography. Common sense. This is one of the things that India cannot get in its head. And I have to say this also. This is one of the things that a lot of people in the Kremlin can't get in their head. You will never be fully accepted by people who have been raised generation after generation after generation, and who have been inculcated with the ideas that you're less than them and that you should be destroyed or dismantled or subjugated. And so no matter how much you want to get in bed with the people, as that old saying goes, if you lie down with dogs, don't complain if you come up with fleas, right? So as the entire global system implodes, you're telling me that the leadership of these small countries and these other countries and these European countries don't have the foresight to see that they too will be victims of a predatory system. It's not just a predatory America. The entire system is predatory. It's built and based upon taking what other people have to enrich yourself, to keep your people civilized and living above their means at the expense of everybody else. What do we call that? A leech, a parasite, right? A vampire, Nosferatu. You know how leeches attach to a host body, or you have these worms that get in your system and they're attached to your host body, and you start craving things that normally you wouldn't crave a lot, and you are eating it because it's their desire for you to eat it. You think it's coming from you, but you don't know something else is pulling the strings, and they're making you do this for their survival, even though it's a detriment to your well-being. So they latch a hold of you like the leeches. They suck your blood. The parasites, they kill you from the inside. This is what the Western system is doing, and it is dying a natural death. And nobody wants to acknowledge it. The whole system is imploding. As I said to you, let me go to a definition for you real quick, okay? I want to go to a definition for you while we wait for him, whether he comes or not. I want to go to something. Right. According to the dictionary, the word parasite means an organism that lives on or inside a host organism, deriving nutrients at the host's expense, often causing harm or disease, and in some cases, death, right? Who is in Africa stealing the resources and exporting terrorism? Who's in Latin America overthrowing governments to dominate the resources? You don't have to answer that. That's a rhetorical question, because we've already heard girly boy Lindsey Graham say what he said. Who is destroying their own allies' position to compete against them by putting them in a position to deindustrialize, to not have alternative means of fuel? Huh? And who is in Asia trying to prevent the unity of Asia and the breakout capacity of the Chinese nation? Who is doing this? Because in mathematics, to get to the root of the thing, they ask you to find what? The greatest, what? Common denominator. All right? And the common denominator is America, it's Britain, it's NATO. Am I missing something? Everywhere there's trouble, everywhere there's war, everywhere there's disillusionment, there's very people who claim to want stability, international peace, and human rights for everybody are the very ones that are flooding the markets with weapons of destruction, whether they're machine guns, hand grenades, missiles, radars, warplanes, warships, submarines, nuclear weapons, biological weapons, chemical weapons, sanctioning people, training terrorist elements, then supporting them in society to cause division and terror, so that they can then step in and be the mediator so that they can have both parties under their direction. I'm not making this stuff up. That is what parasites do. They divide. When you eat something, they take the nutrients. Now you eat the food, but they divide the nutrients up for themselves so that they can survive off of your misery, off of your destroying your health. That is exactly what they do in the Western world. I'm not making this. Let me go to the chat real quick. Hey, we're going to rock and roll until he gets here. And if he doesn't get here, we still going to rock and roll. You know how we do things. This is the most powerful platform for truth, bar none, on God's green earth. M. Sparks is in the building. And salute to you, my friend. I call it a coalition of the Neanderthals. Yeah. Salute everyone. Perseverance Chameleon is in the building. All right. M. Sparks says, the downfall of the soulless grindo mutants is priceless. He said he has his popcorns and he's smiling. Oscar 1101 says, do you think Cuba can nuke the U.S. with Iranian missiles? I hope so. No. For Cuba does not have nuclear weapons. Cuba, I don't even think Cuba even wanted nuclear weapons. Ever wanted them. And when the Soviet Union placed nuclear weapons there, it wasn't at the behest of Cuba, even though Cuba was telling them, hey, look, we think America is going crazy. It was because it was an asymmetrical move by the Soviet Union, because the U.S. had started placing, I think they call Pershing missiles, capable of striking Moscow within minutes. They started placing them in Turkey and in Germany. And this was an asymmetrical move to put pressure on the United States to make them pull out. See, when we hear about the Cold War and the Cuban Missile Crisis, we hear about Kennedy ordered the blockade of Cuba and Khrushchev had to back down. We don't hear about the backdoor negotiations that allowed the United States to save face. Yes, it was publicly announced that the Soviet Union would pull its missiles, its nuclear weapons out of Cuba. But what was quietly done was it forced also the United States to pull those missiles out of Turkey and out of Germany. All right. Now, again, since you brought up Cuba, let's think about the hypocrisy of America. Again, see, no matter where you look, you can see the arrogance of empire, the hubris of the Western world, the hypocrisy of the West. America gobbled up the former Soviet states, then started rearranging their governments and their form of governance at the behest of imperial thinkers, so that they could use them to hold the entire world at the barrel of a gun. They started pushing forward towards Russia's borders, and America started saying, oh, this is not aimed at Russia, this is aimed at Iran. This is aimed at North Korea. But you got it in Europe. You didn't have it placed by them. You had the stuff placed in Europe, in former Soviet territory, which is an affront to Russia itself. Because you think about, what if Mexico said, you know what, I'm tired of America treating us like stepchildren. We want Russian bases here. Remember Lindsey Graham threatened to invade Mexico when Mexico said that they were thinking about backing the peso with silver? You remember that? Go Google it. He said that would force the United States to go in and overthrow the Mexican government. Now, I thought you're supposed to be allies. What if Canada says, hey, we don't want to be the 51st state and we're tired of you threatening us, and so we're going to pull out of our NATO alliance and we're going to align with Russia, and we're going to allow Russia to ring the northern border of the United States with Russian military bases? Do you think that America would allow that? And I don't care what rational thinking that the Russians present to them and say, hey, this is not against you, America, but this is against the so-called narco terrorists down in Latin America. The same excuse that the United States used to overthrow the Venezuelan government and all of those other governments, right? Do you think that that would be enough for America to say, okay, go and ring our borders with those bases? America would be like, no. If you do this, we are going to take this as a threat to our national security. and we're going to go to war. But she believes that she only has that prerogative, nobody else. That's why they openly state that, hey, you are not allowed to have any spheres of influence, and yet at the same time say that Pax Americana is being revived and we will not allow anyone to set up any bases in the Western Hemisphere, while you have hundreds of bases in the Eastern Hemisphere. The sheer hypocrisy is on a level unheard of. And empires before was braggadocious. They were arrogant and full of hubris. Where are they today? And when you look at those empires, and then you look at today's modern Babylon or modern Rome, which is America, and also Britain, they have to go the same way as the other empires, whether you want it or not. It's not me. I'm talking about historical facts. Think about what led to the downfall of those little small empires at the time. And now look at America and Britain, and look at how they have taken those and multiplied all of the faults of the old empire, and they have metastasized it to a unbelievable ratio. So if those nations and empires fell for just a fraction of what America and Britain has done, what do you think is going to happen to them? I'm talking about mathematically and scientifically. I'm not talking about your emotions. I'm talking about mathematically, scientifically, and let us not forget, historically. Huh? I'm asking. These are things that need to be addressed. That if we don't address these things, you will never get to the root cause of the chaos in West Asia, of the collapse of Europe, of the influx of terror in northern Africa, of the overthrowing of the governments in Latin America, of the positioning of warplanes and warships and weapons of destruction in Asia to confront a China that is not belligerent. You got to go to the core. You can't treat cancer by putting a Band-Aid on a scratch on your arm. You can't treat food poisoning by going outside cutting the grass. You have to understand the symptoms and the causes so that you can address them, or else life may be lost. Look at what's going on. Nobody wants to address the causes. Everybody, even some alternative media, they are still inculcated with certain aspects of Western domination in Europe. In U.S. hubris. They are, and you can hear it in their tone, because they don't want to give up this idea of America being the center of the world, of Europe being the center of the world. Remember that you have civilization states that far exceed and surpass the existence of the Western world. If they are still here, then that tells you that they can adapt. It may take time, but they are adaptable. And we're seeing them adapt from a dollar hegemonic, racist, colonialistic system, and they're moving on with it. And this is enraging the American and Western empire. Everything that I'm saying is absolute fact. Everything. But America believes that she is that city that sitteth upon the hill, and that by God's divine decree, she is the exception to the rules. Laws of physics don't apply to her. Laws of science don't apply to her. The laws of industry doesn't apply to her. The laws of military geopolitics doesn't apply to her. The laws of history doesn't apply to her. Oh yeah, that happened for them, but not for us. We're more powerful. We're richer. Oh, we have strategic think tanks to think far ahead, to do this and to do that. This is absolute insanity. I'm trying to see. I hear, hey, hold on 1 second, everybody. I hear my alarm clock going off. Hold on 1 second. Give me 1 second. I'm not going anywhere. All right. My alarm clock is going off. All right, we got that out of the way. All right. Yes. So I want you to think. So they believe that they are. I can go and bomb you. It's always justified. If you fight me back, you're a tyrant, you're a murderer, you're a killer. I want you to think about the mass incarceration. And this, listen to me good, this did not start under Trump. Richard Nixon said that that we need to break up. Now, if you think I'm lying, go look at the Freedom of Information Act, okay? Because everything I'm telling you can be verified. We need to break up strong black families. How can we do that? Then you have the crack epidemic. Richard Nixon, assistant or one of his advisors, openly stated, and you can find this on YouTube too, openly stated that what we need to do is vilify black people on the news. This is what he says. He said, and to turn the population, and I'm paraphrasing, to turn the population against them and to look at them suspiciously, right? Now, and to deprive the black family, what we'll do, we'll elevate the black woman over the black man, we'll give her some opportunities, then we'll brainwash her. I don't need a man. I don't need this. And then we'll use the court system to help to break up and enforce this. And now the ramifications of this is houses without fathers. And they say black people, even though by statistics, there are more single mothers that are white than black, but you don't get that. This is what I'm saying. So by omission, you just think that, oh, black families are broken up. You don't look at the cause. America is talking about terror, fighting terror. Who trained Osama bin Laden? Who armed Osama bin Laden? Who shared intelligence with him? Who treated him in one of the U.S. naval hospitals, I believe, in Bahrain or Qatar, one of them, when he was wounded? Who had Osama bin Laden and Osama bin Laden's father and brother come to Texas for a while? Who entertained the Taliban in the White House? Didn't old Ronald Reagan try to strike a deal with the Taliban? Google it. Because they realized that Afghanistan was rich in minerals and they wanted pipelines. And the Taliban was saying, okay, that's cool, but we need more than what you're offering us. And when Reagan was like, nah, we're going to give you this, and that's it, the demonization of Afghanistan began. Go Google what I'm saying. And now you see the 9/11, and then you see the U.S. going in there for 21 years, spending trillions of dollars. You look at the Taliban as the terrorists. You look at ISIS and Al-Qaeda as terrorists, even though they're elements of the British and the U.S. Special Intelligence Forces, right? But you don't look at the cause, the makers. This is the tricks of the magician. They're always, listen to me good. America is bombing Iran. America is the victim. Iran is the tyrant. America went into Syria illegally against all international norms, and Assad was the tyrant. America went into Iraq after arming Iraq, financing Iraq, had Donald Rumsfeld present Saddam with an award, and then Donnie comes back into power and demonizes Saddam Hussein, and then they go in there and remove him from power. Everywhere there's trouble, there's the US, there's the UK intelligence services. And they are becoming more and more desperate because the time for them to be powers are dying. M. Sparks says, all roads to evil, immorality, and unhuman actions lead directly to the grindles. Let's see. Yeah, Oscar. Morality doesn't apply to us. See, again, if it's up here, actions follow. Look, you can be as, if a person, if their mind has been robbed of the light of wisdom, I don't care how much you talk to them, you will never get through to them because they're so caught up into what they perceive that anything outside of that is not reality. That's why it's so hard for them to make this switch. This is why it's so hard for them to accept that their day has passed. This is why it's so hard for them to realize that the world is moving on. So they're saying, instead of me allowing that, I'll burn the world down and rule over the ashes if need be. It's amazing. Hold on, I just got a beep. Yep, just got a message. Hold on one second, everybody. I don't know if you heard that on the computer. My phone is synced to it also. Hold on one second. Let's see. Come on. Man, where are you at? Come on now, man. Hold on one second, everybody. I'm checking my messages. Still hadn't gotten back with me. That was somebody else. Anyway, so again, I told you we'll rock and roll with or without them. The show goes on. Someone asked me, they sent me an email and they said, "Hey, Rashid, I don't like this line of thinking. But do you believe that sometimes your show is being sabotaged where people will come on your show or say they'll come and they don't come?" I say, I don't think about that. I don't think about that. But I do know it's being sabotaged, not by the guests, but by StreamYard and other platforms, I would say. Okay, I'll say that. Sometimes the links go through. Sometimes the links doesn't go through. I remember Flying Crocodile told me, sent me a message one time and said that they received the message, the notification that my show was live. I believe they said they received it 12 hours later. I could be wrong with the hour. It might have been a day later or 12 hours. I believe it was 12 hours later. It's absolutely insane what they do, but that's what they do. And what you do, you make the best of the hand that you're dealt. Okay? That's what you do. That is the mind of someone that is mature or maturing. But when we look at the mind of those who are supposed to be the most matured, and they run governments and nations and military and finance centers, we look at them. Look at the president of the United States for a second. When Robert Mueller died, right? He said, "Good." You know, that's the president. And if he is vindictive like that, and if he has a state of mind like that, remember, he surrounded himself with the very same people who think and act like him or who act upon his wishes. He is supposed to be the example for the American people, right? And since he always talks about America as the leader of the free world, he is supposed to be the leader of the free world. What kind of political statement is that? And what kind of example is that for other people and for children? Why won't anybody ask that? It was just hushed up and pushed up under the rug, right? And I'm no fan of any of them, but I believe the former FBI director, I believe he served in the military, something that Trump didn't do with his 5 deferments because of bone spurs, according to what he says. He says that he is a president that will defend America and will do what is necessary. Well, the American people are saying what's necessary is to put Ivanka and Kushner and Barron and the other ones in uniform and put them on the front line and lead by example. Look at the Russian forces. I want you to see the stark difference. When the Russian forces are on the battlefield, their generals are not in Moscow. They have some in there, but they have generals on the battlefield leading the charge. That's why you'll see the West say, this general was killed. Ukraine killed this general. How did they kill him? Because he was leading his forces. He didn't have a lieutenant on the battlefield leading forces or a captain leading the forces. He had the general on there. So if you are truly a patriot, like you say, and you truly stand for America and you want America first, they say, and since you always harping on Jesus, even though you say that you don't believe in God, didn't Jesus say there's no greater sacrifice than for one to lay down their lives? Well, be an example of that and put your children, the ones who are your lineage, on the line, and be so readily to bomb then Iran as you are now with other people's children on the line. Sacrifice. Okay, then sacrifice. Show us your sacrifice. That's what I'm asking. Put the children of the 14 other billionaires on the front line. Because we do know that the people who are fighting come from poor and middle class families who went into the military, some as a service of duty, and some because they didn't want to be stuck in a area where they couldn't get out or progress or do or advance. So they took the military route. And you say no new wars, and yet you started multiple wars. So my thing is, hold on one second, let me show you something. You know how we do it. See, I do this because I have to prove what I'm saying, okay? AI overview for the word example, because he needs to be the example. Since he's the highest officer of the land and the so-called leader of the free world, he is supposed to lead by what? Example, right? And since we're in this war and multiple wars under his administration, let's look at what AI overview says. An example is a specific instance, sample, or case that illustrates a general rule, represents a larger group, or serves as a model to be imitated or avoided. So the example that you're showing us is that the rich have privileges that the middle class and the poor don't. Instead, you should be showing us that no matter the wealth of a person, no matter the connections of a person, if I deem that this is in America's best national interest, I'm going to put the ones I love the most on the battlefield. Put Ivanka in uniform. Put Barron in the uniform. Put Trump Jr. in the uniform. Put them out on the front line and go take Carg Island if you want to take that island so bad. Go do it. Lead by example. Otherwise, stop with all of this chest thumping. I'm a war president. I'll do this and I'll do. Lead by example. You are supposed to be the leader of the free world, okay? So free yourself of arrogance. And you know what a sacrifice is. It is giving or being willing to give something that is dear to you. It's not a sacrifice if it's not from the heart, if it's not dear to you. You don't know those people in arms. You don't know those people in those families who are making that sacrifice. You know Barron, you know Ivanka, you know Donald Jr., you know the rest of your children. To lead by example is to sacrifice, as you say that people should do. Put them in army fatigues, in a naval dress, in Marine uniform, and put them out there and let them fire some missiles and let them conduct military operations. And then we can take you serious. But you're so willing to shed the blood of other people because you don't have a dog in the race or a horse in the race. But you put them in there and see how quick you will be to pull the trigger. But as long as you don't have no skin in the game, oh, we just bombed such and such, and we bombed this, and oh, we're deploying troops here. Deploy your family there. See how fast you'll be, how quick you'll be to start a war then. When Ivanka's on the front line. When Barron is on the front line. Hell, Barron is about 7 feet tall, 6'8", 6'7". Put him out there. But I do know this, that each and every one of them have made tens of millions and hundreds of millions, and even some, like Jared Kushner, has made billions of dollars since you've been in office. Your net worth has increased by twice, I believe. Double. So you guys are profiting off of war and profiting off the lives of people who are willing to sacrifice, yet you don't want to sacrifice your life. Man, if you don't get the flip out of here with that, stop it. And then you want, like when the head of the U.S. counterintelligence program stepped away, Trump had a lot to say about the guy. He's such and such and such and such. Yeah, but even though I don't agree with the guy, for talking for doing some of the clandestine work he did, but I think the guy served in 11 tours of duty around the world. So even though I don't agree with him murdering people, because he probably did that, and sabotaging infrastructure, which he probably did, but at least he led by example. The only example you've led by is hobnobbing with gangsters. And your policy is a reflection of that hobnobbing because you're showing us gangsterism. Oh man, I'm telling you. Oh, buddy. Yeah. Corrupt, immoral Anglo leadership and a dumb up, willfully ignorant proletariat of over propagandized sheeples. Absolutely. I was listening to something. I played on one of the shows where the person brought up some of the stuff, and they could not. Red Axis, he didn't show. I'm waiting on him, and I contacted him. He didn't show, and maybe it's because he's in Malta. But like I said, let me make this point too. After the show that we did, Brian didn't make. He contacted me. I told you I wouldn't have to contact. He said whenever both of us get a chance to, and right now my schedule is kind of jam-packed a little bit. That we'll do a show, but what we're going to probably do is pre-record it because of his schedule and my schedule, and then we'll air it. But things happen. All right, I was looking forward to him, and maybe he'll contact me after the show, and maybe he has some time mixed up because I think man, like 8, 7, 8, something like that, hours different. Like Brian is like 12 hours different, 11 or 12 hours different. Okay. So mistakes are made, bro, especially when you're trying to coordinate with people around the world. All right. You even see when sometimes when Carl and I have done about 25, 30 shows together. Um, you've seen how sometimes even Carl was like, oh my God, I messed up at the time or something like that. It happens. It happens, man. All right. So I'm not really sweating it. We still getting the truth. As long as you get the truth, it doesn't matter who it comes from. All right. Because the truth is the truth, and the truth will stand on its own. No worshiper of cult of personalities. Just truth. That's I can't get you out of here. I can't save you from the destruction. The truth can. So don't focus on Rashid. Don't focus on personalities. That is what has gotten us in this position right now, because the people focused on Trump. They focused on Obama. They focused on Biden. Instead of focusing on truth, they focused on personalities. And when you focus on personality and you become a cult or personality worshiper, you are easily misled. That's why when I'm talking to you guys, I always tell you, go Google what I'm saying. And I'll look it up on the air. There's a message right there. Hold on one second. And I'll look it up on the air to show you what I'm talking about. Huh? Well, hold on one second, everybody. Okay. Okay. Check this out. I got a couple surprises for you coming in on the show. Just got it. I got a couple more surprises coming in for you. A couple confirmations. Okay. So that's cool too. If one won't and one don't, one or two will. It's cool. I got some surprises for you guys coming up, seriously. And also we got a channel member stream coming up, and we also have another channel member stream and another Patreon stream coming up too, and some articles will be dropping on Patreon this week also. So I want to say that to all of those who are patrons and those who are channel members. All right, thank you so much. But let's see. Them Sparks says, no biggie, Rashid, guests are always a plus, but we are here for you, my brother. We're here for the truth. I appreciate that. There he is in the building. I told you he would be here. I told you. Let me pull him up. See, you guys waited and waited. See, he's here. I told you it was a time difference. Greetings, my friend. How are you doing
Hello.
today?
Hello.
So I was telling the people, I said, listen, because they kept asking where you were, and I said, there's a big time difference, and sometimes we have to calculate that in our head. But I said, if he doesn't make it, he'll call me. He'll let me know. He'll contact me and let me know.
No, of course. But it's not even 5 o'clock here. So,
So for those who don't know who you are, would you please give them a little information on who you are?
well, I am the grandfather of a 10-year-old daughter. I think that is the most important thing. Because as we're living in a crazy world, I'm very worried about what kind of world she will grow and live in. Hopefully that there will still be a world to live in. So although I've done a lot of things in my life, for the present moment and for the remaining days of my life, I think this is the most important thing, that I'm
Mhm.
the grandfather of a 10-year-old child who feels responsible a bit for her future and for what I haven't managed to do to give her a better life.
Mm. So on the ground in Europe, how is it right now with the sanctions against Russia, and then now we see the oil markets and the gas and the fertilizers being stopped coming out of the Strait of Hormuz? Is it getting bad? Are the prices going higher in Europe?
Yes, of course. And Europe has been very short-sighted to the point of being suicidal because it had built its prosperity on two important things. One is cheap energy from Russia, and number two, cheap security from the United States. Both now are gone. The first one by choice, when instead of working to prevent a war that could have been prevented, the war in Ukraine could have been prevented had years ago, with the collapse of the Soviet Union, there was two choices, either to extend NATO to threaten Russia or to develop the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, which meant that you developed cooperative security, which means that my security and your security are common. And if I threaten you, I'm also threatening my own security. Unfortunately, the road taken was to enlarge NATO. And as a result, we have the war that we have now. And with the economic implications for Europe cutting itself off from cheap energy. The second pillar is also gone. President Trump makes it very clear that he's not a charitable institution and that Europe has to pay more for its defense and also to buy its weapons from the United States. Now, instead of dealing with the big problems that we have in Europe, which is a declining economy, which is ungovernability. One country after the other is finding it difficult to find a government to govern the country. We are in a bad situation. Obviously, with the Iran war and the energy that was coming from the Gulf also to replace what we lost from Russia, things are becoming much more difficult.
Well, what is the temperature amongst the people? Do they feel that the United States betrayed them by the move against Russia and limiting their oil and gas supplies from Russia, and then doubling and tripling the price that Ally is selling natural gas to Europe now? And do they feel betrayed by the United States?
They feel betrayed by their leaders because the leaders have been complicit in this. So, for example, when the president of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, went to the golf course of President Trump in Scotland to sign an agreement which meant that while the products of the European Union would be subjected to a tariff when they enter the United States, products coming from the United States would have no tariff on them. Apart from that, Ursula von der Leyen agreed to buy energy from the United States, which costs, as you say, 3-4 times more than that was coming from Russia. And apart from that, there was a commitment to buy over $600 billion worth of armaments and also to invest over $700 billion worth of dollars in the United States. So they feel betrayed by their own leaders because it's their leaders, very short-sighted, instead of looking at the interests of the people in the different countries of the United States, most of the governments have behaved like elites cut off from the needs and concerns of common people in their daily lives, which are a job, housing, education, health, and instead money is being taken from those areas to fund a war machine.
And I'm glad you brought that up because I was going to ask you, um, is there outrage because just like it's outrage here that the United States can always find money for war but can't find money for education and health and all of this? Is there outrage by the European people that their leaders can always find in the budget money for the Ukrainian war and to keep that war going instead of going to the people of Europe?
Yes, people had thought that the lesson of the financial crisis of 2008 had been learned. And the lesson was that even then, 18 years ago, the governments were ready to save the banks but they did not have money to save families from the consequences of that crisis. A crisis brought about by greed, not because of people who run these systems are incompetent, but because always they make the common ordinary people pay. Now, this time, yes, people are getting very angry, and this is shown in the not just in the opinion polls, but in the electoral results of one government after another, one country after another. People feel very upset that they are told that social services like pensions are a luxury, that public health is a luxury, that public education is a luxury, and instead you take this money away from these sectors. Also, I must say, from sectors such as research, and put it into armaments, which you're not even yourself producing, but buying from the United States. Now, this is a time when European leaders were supposed to be working on renewing and giving new life to the European dream of creating a strong economy, environmental protection, and social protection. All that now has been thrown out of the window, and we are being told to accept meekly that the solution is war and to spend more on armaments. It is absolutely suicidal.
Do you think that there's any foresight in the leadership in Europe to go and try to make amends with Russia because of Russia's cheap gas and oil that they were selling at 40% cheaper or something like that? And because I read reports about the deindustrialization of Germany, which was the economic engine of Europe, and if Germany deindustrializes, then that's a big portion of the European economy. Or are they going to try to make amends with Russia, or are they going to ride this out until the wheels fall off?
Well, we have to see the electoral calendar of the different countries over the next 3 to 4, 5 years. Some of the leaders who are responsible for this disaster will be voted out of power. So they are being very short sighted. They know that they are there for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years at most, and then they don't care what happens after them. So for the time being, I don't see any sign of the governments of Germany, France, and the UK, because even the UK is very influential, though it's not in the European Union, of changing course. And the only way to make them change their course is to make them lose power and have alternative governments in their place, hoping that the new governments would choose a new route, which was there right from the beginning, which is you need a common security home in Europe, which means from Portugal to Russia, you have a cooperative security system. But I think, and this is not a conspiracy theory, it's enough to read a lot of the declassified documents that have come out of the US and Moscow to show that since 1991, there was never, from the point of the United States, any strategy to help Europe unite. They wanted to keep Europe divided, which means keep the Germans and the Russians away from each other, and as much as possible, even though the Berlin Wall has come down, create new walls instead of it to ensure that the Europeans do not unite. Henry Kissinger used to say, I'd rather deal with a lot of dwarfs than with one giant.
um, so, do you think that America purposely sabotaged the European Union's economy with the policies against Russia? And because, if I'm not mistaken, the European economy was a little bit larger than the United States economy, and now it's tanking. Do you think that some of the policies were made to purposely remove competition from the United States?
Yes, I have no doubt about that. And also because it's the politics of dominance. So, I make you do what I want for my own interest. And especially since Trump came into power, this kind of one-sided approach, zero-sum game. I win, you lose. He has practiced it all over the world, including so-called allies, which are more vassals than allies.
Mm. So what is Europe? What are the European think now? Because Trump has said, "Hey, look, I'm going to leave you to clean up the mess in Ukraine, and we're going to bomb Iran." What is the thought in the minds of the leaders and the people in Europe right now?
There's a difference, and it's important to make a difference between, because we're not talking of one block where every people, obviously, where everyone thinks the same. You have governments, most of them compromised, I think, also in the transatlantic network, which I think is a deep state. I don't think that the deep state is a conspiracy theory. You have, and something which we haven't mentioned so far, it's the AI military industrial complex based in the US, but it has its tentacles all over the world, and they drive policy. And the European Union and the European governments of the day, most of them are part of that network. It's interesting to see how whoever is in the White House and whoever has the majority in the U.S. Congress, one thing that never goes away, but whoever governs, they are always there. It's the budget, as you said, for war. And if you see the money that is spent on lobbying, the money that is spent in campaigns, the money that is spent on think tanks, the shares and stocks that 48% of the Congress has in the military industrial complex, it's a terrible machine which feeds itself. So when they are voting for war, they are also voting for the companies that they have invested in and for the companies that have financed their campaigns. And what is happening, I think, in a lot of so-called democracies, including the United States and also in Europe, is that we've moved from democracies to plutocracies. It's the people with money, it's a government for people with money and for people of money.
Do you think that they stop and think, yeah, I may be enriching myself, but I'm undermining the base of my civilization by dumbing down the people and by weakening the institutions and the structures which make a state to be viable?
Well, if they were rational and wise, they would do that. But I think blind greed is blind greed. They look after their own self-interest, and they're also very short-sighted and also very, very short-term. We have a lot of problems that have accumulated in the West now, which needs long-term investment and which needs long-term vision. Usually at this time of year, so far it hasn't come out. There is what is called a technology tracker, which is measured by the Australian Social Policy Institute, which looks at 74 different technologies that you need to move on in the 21st century. It's good to have a look at who is listed in the top places. No need to tell you that number one is China, number two is India, and then there is the United States, and then later on there is the European Union. Um, the West is not having any long-term vision and is not having any long-term planning, which is very different to if you look, for example, at China. China has become 84% self-sufficient in energy because it has invested over the long term in renewable energies to be less dependent on other countries, and it pays off wisely because even now with the Hormuz closed, China would still be able to not only because of its strategic reserves, which it has built over the years, also because it has become more self-sufficient, and it takes only 6% of its energy needs from the Gulf region. It has diversified its sources, it has diversified its supply chains, not something that Europeans have not done so foolishly.
Do you think that America and the West are jealous of China because China had the foresight to invest in all of this technology, to invest heavily in education, to sacrifice so that they can put themselves in this position while America dragged everybody to war constantly?
Yeah, unfortunately, yes. But China did not do this at the expense of the United States or of Europe. China just focused on her own home, putting her house in order and investing long term in its young people. And today, the amount of young people that come out of universities in China, doing science, technology, maths, engineering, is far superior to what the United States and the Europeans are producing. Those are not young people taken from those countries. They are Chinese people which the government has invested in. So there is an interesting concept of Confucius, where he talks about virtuous competition. If there are two people running against each other, they can either be, allow each other to run, and the one who runs fastest will win, or the one who is running behind trips the other one who's running ahead. And I think most of the strategies used by the United States and Europe in the last few years has been, rather than to train better and get better at running, they try to trip the other countries, not just China. I think even India, even Brazil. I think one of the biggest problems of the West is that it still hasn't come to terms that the world has changed and that the colonial mindset that served it for 500 years is now over. For a colonial mindset to prevail, you need the colonizer, but you also need the consent of the colonized. The colonized and the former colonized are less ready now to consent to being dominated because they have moved ahead technologically, economically, politically, and militarily. It's enough to see what's happening in Iran, where with a cheaper military budget, they are actually being very effective against weapons that are deemed to be superior because they cost much, much more, but in fact, they are inferior.
Mm. I was listening to Lindsey Graham, and he was talking about that if they could take Iran, they would with Venezuela and Iran, they would sit upon 33% of the world oil reserves. Um, do you think that this irrational, unthought out plan of dominating Iran has a lot to do with the petrodollar, and which the West short sightedness, and America trying to preserve her role as the dominant power and the petrodollar as the world reserve currency?
Yes, completely. And one of the biggest unintended consequences of this Iran war is that the huge damage that the Gulf countries are facing, and also with their energy facilities, and if the war remains, goes on for more weeks, they will be damaged even more, is that they will not have the investment to put in the US dollar. So this is creating a monster that comes back to bite you because the United States has been able to have such a huge debt. I mean, I think now you've surpassed $39 billion,
Correct.
and the deficit is rising because it could print enough dollars to keep on going. Now, and it's not going to happen, I think, from one day to the next, but the way things are happening, it will be accelerated. The dominance of the dollar is going down, and 84%, if not more, 84, 86% of the world is creating new alternative financial systems, including using their own currencies to trade instead of trading with the dollar. It won't happen from one day to the next, but it's definitely accelerating. So I come from a colony which used to be a British colony, where the pound sterling was the dominant sterling in the world for a time. Then after the Second World War, obviously, the pound went down and the dollar came up. When empires decline, their currencies decline with them.
Do you think that, um, you know, President Trump threatened to bomb Iran's power grid? Iran said that if that happened, they would take out all the power grids in the region. And Trump announced out of the blue after the 48-hour deadline that he was talking to Iranian leadership, but the Iranian leadership said that they weren't talking to Trump. And then Trump comes back and say, well, I don't know who to talk to because I don't know who's the leader. Do you think he had to pause because of the bond market, because he was watching what the bond market was doing, and if those interest rates rise, the United States could not fund itself and would eventually essentially be insolvent, bankrupt?
Yes, in fact, I think what is happening, let me try to simplify as much as possible. There is an interesting German sculptor who's called Thomas Schutte. He has created a number of works called United Enemies. United Enemies is about figures of two men who hate each other, who want to kill each other, who want to push away each other, but they know that the only way they can stand together is to stand together, to be together, because they are tied by the same rope. In an interdependent world, we are united enemies. We have to somehow or other live together, and the consequences that we cause on others come back to bite us as well. And what is happening in Iran now and in the Gulf shows how interdependent the world is. If I hurt you, somehow or other, I'm going to hurt myself. So it's not a matter of being sentimental or being naively pacifist. We are in an interdependent world. What happens on the other side of the planet comes back to affect us. So the economic, financial, military, political, human consequences of this war, which again could have been prevented had diplomacy prevailed, instead of this mentality of as if we're in a cowboy film. A cowboy goes into a saloon, starts shooting around, doesn't care who he's hit and what the consequences are. We cannot run the world like that, because ultimately we destroy ourselves. I was following today a very interesting presentation by a Harvard professor, Ted Postel, who was actually showing that if Israel were to use the nuclear bomb on Iran, the effect that it would have on Israel as well, because eventually then there will be retaliation, will be equally destructive. So, it's foolish to think that you can destroy others without harming and hurting yourself.
But do you think that because they're seeing a world moving outside of the dollar and outside of colonial domination, um, in their mind it's unacceptable, and they're trying everything that they can to prevent the rise of emerging poles of power?
Yes, yes. And I must say that President Kennedy, just a few months before he was assassinated, actually foresaw this when he gave an excellent speech about the arrogance of power and how in the world today, and that was what, about 60 years ago, no? Actually, you cannot push others into a corner and expect them to be suppressed and dominated without them fighting back. So yes, I agree with you. This is what they are trying to do, to keep on dominating and to keep on suppressing others. But their problem is that whereas before, let's take 70 years ago, no, 70 years ago, when a lot of former colonies started becoming independent, they were still very weak then. And what happened, if one were to study the history of decolonization, together with it, you need to study the history of recolonization, Because while formal independence was being granted, once these countries started running their own destinies and started saying, listen, the resources that we have, the gold, the diamonds, the oil, what we have is ours and we need to use it for the benefit of our people, then you see a series of assassinations, coup d'etats, wars, to ensure that although you gave them formally their independence and their sovereignty, you take it back because you want to take back their resources. And that is why Lindsey Graham says, let's take the resources of Iran and Venezuela so that it will sort of fuel our empire for longer. But I don't think that this is now the world of 70 years ago or of 80 years ago. And those who have been suppressed for a long time have now started, not all of them, but some of them have started to push back because they have built the capability to fight back and to push back.
And I noticed another part of the independence movement to keep those former colonies under their the reign of the former colonial power. They integrated their financial systems into the former colonial power as to have control over the economics of it. And now I believe that they're lashing out because, like you see in Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, all of these nations are saying, you know what, we no longer want that France to dominate us. We no longer want France to dictate our financial policy. Whereas they had to deposit 55 to 60% of their earnings as a nation into a French bank. Now they just opened up their own bank and they're financing projects in their own countries using the resources of their countries as a backing. And now we see the influx of terrorism because that is a tool used by former colonial powers to destabilize their former colonies. I said that to say this. According to Fortune magazine, and according to a readout that came, the headline was this: the Treasury just declared the U.S. insolvent, and the media missed it, which is major because if the U.S. is insolvent, and we know she is, how is she not caught in a catch-22 to continue to print money to try to keep her hegemony, running up her debt while alienating the very nations she needs to buy the debt, and which will sooner or later cause a rush out of the dollars, which would cause hyperinflation, which will cause an immediate collapse of the American empire. So is she not caught in this catch-22 trying to maintain her imperial power, and is France in the same boat?
Yes, yes, and this is it. If instead of putting your house in order, reindustrializing, investing in education, investing in research, science and technology, rebuilding your communities, you want to have those from others, you choose the tools of domination and you try to perpetuate your domination over others instead of addressing the problems at home. And as I said, sovereignty doesn't mean having a head of state, having a band playing your national anthem and having your flag. Okay, that is nice for ceremonies. But real sovereignty is having the resources that you have and using them for your people. This is one of the big problems of why you have wars in Iran, why you had them in Libya, why you had them in Iraq, why you had them in a lot of other places. In Africa, we can mention one country after the other, where when those leaders started running their countries with a sovereign mindset, that this is my country and I'm going to run it for my people, then they were either assassinated or removed or it's enough even to look at Iraq. Let's remember that Iraq in 1958 had a democratic prime minister, Mohammed Mossadegh.
You're right.
His crime was that he said the oil of Iran is for Iranians. And once he nationalized the oil, you had the US and the UK president and prime minister through CIA and MI6 organizing a coup to remove him and to bring on the brutal reign of the Shah. Now, this is something which even the CIA has admitted and acknowledged publicly, that they were behind the coup that had deposed the democratic government of Mossadegh. And this is the result. What we see in a lot of different countries is destroy them so that you can manipulate them, that you can take your resources. I mean, I am from Malta, which is just a few minutes away from Libya. In 2011, that country was invaded and broken up, and it still hasn't taken any revived. It's still a failed, broken state, and it should be one of the richest countries in the Mediterranean. But in fact, people are living in a difficult situation because it's a broken country.
So with America trying her best to maintain her position, um, how do you see this thing playing out in West Asia, or what they like to say the Middle East? Because Iran is fighting like hell, and it seems like that they have been prepared themselves, and that they have strong and competent leaders. And it seems like the United States is just lashing out. Israel is just lashing out, and they're even now blaming their European partners for not coming in to help them like they want them to help. Where do you think this is leading us? I know you want to say something ahead.
Listen, the European countries are not, even if they want to, are not in a position to help significantly. Their armies have been depleted. They don't have weapons. So even from that point of view, something which is very interesting and which we have to look at is how the weapons technology is actually working against the traditional dominators. And I repeat, it has become cheaper for the dominated to fight against the dominators. This is happening very clearly in Iran. So, well, what is happening is that the war in Iran is changing. It's helping to, I think, bring into being the multipolar world in a much more clear way. And it is also changing the region over there, because once upon a time, people used to believe that if you have the military bases of the United States, they are there to protect you. They are your security umbrella. In fact, now it is very clear that they are a lightning rod. Instead of protecting you, you need to be protected from them, because they will be targets for retaliation because they have been used against others. This is definitely going to change the way military bases are seen around the world. Also because with the technological development in drones and in ballistic and hypersonic missiles, the military bases have become like aircraft carriers at best. And aircraft carriers have been staying away from where they can be hit. So static large military bases have now become obsolete. So this is also another unintended consequence of what the war against Iran is exposing.
So it's exposing the fall of the American empire, do you say?
But it won't happen from one day to the next, because empires do not go away without a fight, even if it means destroying not only others, but also destroying themselves. Because um, I've been to the United States. I like the United States. I've lived in the United States. I've studied in the United States. And it is such a pity that such a country which is so prosperous and which has so much resources and so much talent, that talent is being used by a small elite to wage wars on other countries, when those resources should be spent on improving lives for American people.
So I hear this multipolar world thing, and when I look at history, and history shows the fall of this empire, the fall of this empire, the fall of this empire. And when we look back, they are no longer relevant today. Now, if we look at the American empire, and we know that she's the largest debtor nation in the history of the world. We know that she's in utter decline. We know that just for a fraction of the evil or the policies that America does now, those other empires have fallen. How can she remain a pole of power if she is the largest debtor nation in the history of the world?
Well, the United States will still remain a formidable power. What is a pity is that there is this mentality of the elite. I don't know whether we should call them the Epstein elite, who think that to remain a power, you need to dominate others. Whereas, in fact, I'm sure that in a multipolar world, as the name itself says, you can have great powers like the United States, like Russia, like China, like India, like Brazil. You can have middle powers, and they can find ways of living together instead of one trying to dominate and destroy the other. 70 years ago, even Richard Nixon himself had told the Time editors in a meeting that he was looking forward to have a world where great powers balance each other, because he said when great powers balance each other, we have periods of peace. Obviously, there's a difference, with words and then actual facts. Empires do not like to decline. Empires do not like to lose their power, and they are ready to use whatever means they have to try and, as much as possible, lengthen their period as a power. What is different from the decline of other powers is that for the first time, we are faced with nuclear power, with nuclear armaments. And whereas before, moments like this, yes, produce terrible wars. It's enough to mention World War One, killing 40 million people, World War Two, killing over 80 million people. And we thought that we had learned what the scourge of war meant. But now it's even scarier, because now there are enough nuclear armaments around the world to destroy humanity. This is the first time in history where human beings can destroy themselves.
But when we look at the underlying facts, let's just take for the Soviet Union. As the financial system collapsed, the Soviet Union broke apart, and it was the largest nuclear power in the world, just like Russia is now. Let's look at America. The debt situation is untenable. Uh, and we know that for empires or to be a viable power, you have to have technological advances. You have to have a high investment in education. You have to have the finances behind it. You have to be very innovative, and all of those things that were her assets have now become liabilities because she's defunded her education. She's no longer innovative. I think about 70% of all patents for the last few years have come out of China. Industrially, she is in decline, and she's no longer a manufacturing power. So, if all of these pillars are pillars of a power, a great global power, how can America remain? I know in our minds we can't see America fall, but how can she remain when her debt is unheard of? And the debt finances is what makes empires go. And when the finances cut off and she has no innovation, no manufacturing, no industrial base, or how can she remain a relevant global power? Because science and history tells us that's an impossibility. Mathematics tells us that's an impossibility.
Yes, and if this decline is allowed to continue unchecked, and if people like Lindsey Graham and the others who support the war machine think that the solution is to have wars in other countries, they will, I think, accelerate the decline. The same can be said of Europe. In the case of Europe, I think it's even worse than the United States. If we look at demographic decline, which we haven't mentioned
Mhm.
so far, in the European Union, in the next 24 years, we'll be losing 1 million persons of working age every year. So we have the one of the lowest across the countries, one of the lowest fertility rates, birth rates in the world, and we do not even have the people to replace those who are dying, because the rate should be over 2%, 2.1, and in most countries it's one, it's even less than one. So what is the European Union doing about this? What is it going to do? Because at the same time, then they are against migrants. And the only way you can reverse the demographic decline in Europe is not to try and to have policies to support families. That's crucial, and that should be definitely done. But I think history has shown that that is not enough. So while at the same time they have demographic decline, at the same time they are spending on war, at the same time they say they don't want people to come from other countries to work in factories, to work in services, to work in health, to work in education. Um, so what are they going to do? So this rot of decline is the decline of the West, and it's no then it's understandable to see the rise of Asia and of Africa. We haven't mentioned Africa a lot. Imagine Europe is a neighbor of Africa. If I can tell you the neglect that Europe has towards Africa in terms of building good relations, having a policy to work with African countries as equal partners, it's frightening. And over the next 20, 30 years, you're going to have 5 young Africans for every old European. I mean, I can't even understand how short-sighted the politicians and policymakers are in Europe if they are concentrating on what's happening in Ukraine, if they're, what's happening in the Gulf, what's happening in Asia, and there they have a continent that is still has a very strong birth rate, just an hour or two away from the southern shores of the European Union, and they don't build a good working relationship with Africa.
Mm. And also China has invested heavily in there, and people don't realize the population, because when we look at India, we'll say 1.43 billion people, and we'll say China 1.42 billion people. Africa, the latest census is between 1.45 billion and 1.6 billion people already
Yes,
on the continent of Africa. And so what China has done, China has moved some of its manufacturing base to Africa. And
yes,
I was talking to a Chinese person, and they say, well, people say that we are the manufacturers to the world, and now we're making Africa the manufacturer to China. And I think because of the colonial mindset, I think Europe and America looks down on that, and they believe that they'll always be there to be used for the resources. And I think this hubris is what is blocking their foresight, and which is helping to aid in the decline and the fall of the Western world.
yes. And if you were to study the relationship between Europe and Africa, even now, you see that the Europeans look at Africa simply as a source of primary materials. So they want to get primary raw materials from there, but then they don't open their market for products from Africa. They don't develop the areas of financial services with Africa, the areas of education and of science and technology. So, whereas in the case of China and even other countries, including Russia, Turkey, even Brazil, go to Africa, and they do it also for their self-interest, but they sit down and work with them as partners. In the case of the Europeans, they still have this kind of colonial dominant mentality. We come here, we tell you what we want from you, and we go away. For example, there is a program of the European Union where, to build and develop relations with Africa. And it's called the Implementation Committee. There isn't even one African sitting on it. So how can you, how can you build a kind of respectful, equal relationship if you still think that you go there to give speeches, to give lectures, to tell them what to do, instead of sitting with them respectfully and working together. We need each other. It's very foolish to still have this mentality of I'm superior to you because of the color of my skin, because of my culture, because of my religion. It's so foolish.
And you've given us a lot of your time, and I gotta get you back on shortly, again on the platform, because I love this conversation. So, and I want to respect your time. So I want to ask one more question: where do you think that this war in West Asia will lead to? Is leading to, and do you think that America will be a shell of herself after it?
First of all, what it's already resulting in is very sad. You see the destruction of parts of Iran, the destruction of parts of Israel, the destruction of the energy infrastructure of the Gulf countries. Now imagine if the escalation continues and their desalination plants are targeted as well. I mean, you'll have millions of people actually not having any water to drink, let alone having a viable economy where to live. So, as usual, war is bringing destruction. So that is the first thing, and destruction at the same time. The depleting the resources of the United States, as we said, which should be spent elsewhere. Um, we'll see how it's going to work out to what the result is going to be. But definitely, the Gulf region, and I think the whole world, with all the consequences that this war is bringing about, is going to be different from the world that we had till the 27th of February 2026.
Thank you so much for joining us and giving us a
Thank
little
you.
of your time. I really appreciate it. We got to have you back on the platform. Be blessed,
Thank you.
be safe, and I'll
My
see you in the
pleasure.
video.
My pleasure. Take care. Take
All
care.
right, all right. Everybody,
Bye.
listen. Please hit the like button. Show your appreciation by hitting the like button, respecting that we had him on the platform for you guys, and you've learned a lot. And so, as I said, I hope that the time that you spent with us, you've got an equal or greater return. Because remember, that's why it's called spending time. And time is the most valuable commodity because it's unrenewable. And once
And
you
we
use,
learn from each other. We
that's
learn
right.
from each other.
That's right.
Thank you.
And so once you use it up, you can never get it back. So make sure that you've gotten an equal or greater return for your time. Now, I like to say this as I say this at nauseum going off the air: do right by others, not because there's some material gain to be had or some accolades to be had. Do right by others because it's the right, the humane, and the godly thing to do. Because even when no one else is watching you, remember that God Almighty is watching you. As my late, great, and beautiful mother would always say, God sits high on the throne of power, but he looks low at the actions of man. Know that I love each and every one of you who loves truth, but know that the love that I have for you will always pale in comparison to the love that God has for you. Until we next speak again, stay strong, stay true, but above all things, remember to stay righteous because righteousness is the only thing that's going to get you out of here. Hey, mama, your baby boy still loves you more than life. Thank you, everybody, for joining me. Peace. We're out of here.